When that case came across my desk, I knew for a fact that if I didn't fight for Richard Glossip, nobody else would. And had we not fought for him, he'd be dead today.
Tulsa Talks is the podcast that is inspiring people to have everyday meaningful conversations to gain perspective and help the world.
Welcome to Tulsa Talks, where we help people have meaningful everyday conversations with those around them to gain perspective of others and themselves. Today, we have Kevin McDugle, former state House representative for the state of Oklahoma. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So you are a former House representative for the state of Oklahoma.
Yes.
And you did this how long ago?
Well, it was 8 years, and I just finished up in November. So decided not to run my last 4 years of eligibility.
All right. And so you almost eight and a half years ago now, you ran.
Yes.
And what was that decision-making process for you? What spawned you to want to be a part of this system, as difficult it can be?
That's a great question. I'd never been to a political meeting in my life. I had a business that had 48 employees getting ready to break over into 50. At that time, the government was telling us that if you don't provide medical insurance for your company, then you're going to pay a penalty of $2,000 per employee, as long as you have over 50 employees. And so it was going to cost me a minimum of $100,000 a year.
No big deal, right?
Yeah, as a small business, you know. And so I figured out that the senator at that time in my district was the one running that bill. And I thought, well, screw it. I'll put 50 grand in and run against him. And I worked for a year and a half, knocking on doors, getting to know the area. And I was 21 points ahead of him going into the last 10 days. And they dropped 350,000 that last 10 days and beat me by 300 votes. First time I ran.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
So, money talks.
Money talks. People believe what they get in the mail, unfortunately, instead of getting out to meet the candidates.
Right.
And, that's a big difference. And I learned a lot of lessons during that time.
What'd you learn?
Well, the biggest thing is if you have enough money to put something in the mailboxes, people will believe everything they get in the mail, unfortunately. And so a big part of what I learned after that was I've got to go knock on their doors. They've got to know exactly who I am. And they did, but they also believed the things that the opponent was putting in their mailbox.
And how many households did you have? How many individual homes did you have in your area?
On the Senate, it was a lot more than that. In the House of Representatives, we have 48,000.
48,000, and you aimed to hit a lot of those with door knocking or putting some information in front of them.
Yeah, unfortunately, not all of those are voters. So we're able to pull the people who voted in the last several elections. So we know who's going to show up in the primary. We know who's going to show up in the general. And you pull that list, and that way you're able to go knock on those specific doors and not waste your time. And after losing in the Senate, I moved out to Wagner County by chance. And there was a seat there that came open, and when I was elected to that seat, I was actually the very first Republican ever in the state history to have that district.
How'd you pull that off?
It was just, it was timing. You know, it's at that time, Oklahoma Democrats are a lot different than Washington, D.C. Democrats. They are more, you know, the hardworking, let's get her done, let's back good people. And our district was going through that change. People were running away from the Democrat Party because of the way they were acting in D.C. And so for me, I hit it at good timing, and they wanted a Republican in that district. And you know, a big part of it here in Oklahoma is just be a good person, love people, talk straight, and let them know exactly what you think, and they love that.
So you got elected. What happened the first day? Can you remember that first day?
I can, yeah. The first day, it's surreal because I remember driving into the Capitol for the first time, and you know, I'm fortunate enough to have done a number of things in my life, and so this was just another one of those things. But the variety of people that I saw when I got there, I remember a grown man crying because he couldn't believe that he was a state representative. You know, it was a big deal, and it is a big deal. It's an honor. I saw it as a position of service. And so for me, I wasn't there for me. I was there to serve the people of Oklahoma. And my office was actually not even my office. I was in that office and seated in that office. My things were in that office, but that was the office of my district. It was their office. So that was the attitude I had. And so for me, it wasn't like I won a medal. For me, it was like, okay, we're getting ready to get to work. I need to figure this thing out.
Yeah. Servant leadership by being placed in those positions.
Oh, we need them. We need
Yeah.
people who are willing to serve. And that same Christ-like attitude, and everything that you do is simply get there, figure it out, do what's best for the people, and have that moral compass that you know that you've got to have to be able to do things the right way.
I suppose you had already done this moral compass leading of people in the other businesses that you've had. So it wasn't that new to you. It was just a different role.
It was a different new. I had gone through a change of life myself several times in my life, up and down, because I really didn't have a foundation, even in my own moral compass. You know, I had a moral compass, but my moral compass was simply, as long as you go to church, you're good. And
So something changed during this 8 years?
it did, and during that 8 years, I actually went to an organization called Mighty Oaks, and I was tricked into going to it, but I went to it, and for the first time after the Marine Corps, I'd gone to the VA for 30 years and saw a psychologist, and psychologist simply said, "Hey, you're broken. Here's some pills," you know. And Mighty Oaks was different because the people that stood in front of me had been on the same battlefields that I'd been on. And all they did was point at the Word of God and say, here's what the Word says, and be in the Word, be in prayer, be in fellowship, and be accountable to somebody. And I started doing that on a daily basis instead of a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah. How long ago?
That was 3 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you spent like 5 or 6 years as a House rep for the state.
Absolutely.
And then you get this foundation in the middle of that.
All
So
right.
you might have thought you were okay before.
Exactly. Thought I was okay. Was going through another divorce, you know, that kind of thing. And not only that, trying to figure out, I mean, when you first get to the Capitol or any of these positions, it takes you a while to find out where the bathroom is. You know what I mean? It's
Sure. Yeah.
2 or
Get
3
your feet
years
under you.
before you get your feet under you. And
2 or 3 years.
at least. And a lot of times, honestly, people are just now getting their feet under them, and they're in leadership now, and they're termed out. So they're going to have to leave, and somebody else is going to have to step in. And
So what do you think about term limits?
I like term limits, but they've got to be long enough that people actually have time to get in, figure out how the system works, figure out how you can do things for the best, because government's so slow. You know, every time I wanted to get something done, I mean, I went in with the idea of, hey, I'm going to be able to go change Oklahoma. And 8 years, honestly, even 12 years, isn't enough to make substantial change.
Is there not a mentoring system to pull people up to speed real quick?
No.
Why not?
No, they, I mean,
I would do that for my business managers.
I know. And it depends. I mean, there again, you might have one Speaker of the House that comes in, and that's his role. That's how he works. But he rotates out, and you got another one in there, and he doesn't operate that way. And so it's nothing consistent, right? And we had the same speaker for 8 years. The whole time I was there, I had the same speaker. And they had some classes you could go to, but as far as mentorship, you weren't assigned to anybody. You know, you just, I remember being on
Get
the
in
House
and do
floor. Just get in and do it, figure it out. Yeah, and you get to watch a few other people do it first, and then you just learn by mistake.
Yeah, I've heard large corporations talk on like different podcasts about how when they were starting like Facebook or whatever, that they found how fast they could break stuff to find where their errors were
Exactly.
and then fix it.
Exactly. And I mean, our government's already broken, so you should be able to go in and just fix it, you'd think. But you know, the one thing that I did realize that needs to be fixed, and I'm not sure it's going to take a real strong individual to get in that leadership role as Speaker of the House to make this change. Right now, the people of Oklahoma don't even realize they elect a local person to go represent them.
Sure.
And it's supposed to be equal representation when you get there, but it's not equal, because as soon as they get there, they give all their power to one guy. They literally hand over everything to the Speaker of the House.
Why are you there?
The Speaker of the House gets to make all those decisions. Speaker of the House, everything rises and falls on him. He gets to decide what bills are heard, which ones aren't heard. If he doesn't like your bill or he doesn't like you, your bill's not getting heard. If he likes you, likes your bill, thinks it's good for the public, then 100% his decision. And
so they're the ones that raise the bills in front of you guys, and then you guys would vote on the bill.
well, they're our bills. So I got to create 8 bills a year. The Speaker of the House has unlimited bills, so he can do as many as he
He can
wants.
filibuster with it, basically.
He can do what he wants to.
I mean, he can make it only about his bills if he writes enough of them.
And he's got to be political enough because he needs enough people on his side to be able to vote for his stuff too. And so there's the trade, horse trading comes in. I'll give you your bill if you'll give me my bill, that kind of thing. The one change that they could make, honestly, is if they would create rules and even by law, say that every bill that gets created gets a hearing, and every bill that gets created gets a hearing in committee. If they make a rule that says if it passes committee, then it goes to the House floor, nobody can stop it, and it gets voted up or down, that's the only way you have true transparency. That's the only way you have true ability to have equal government. Right now, you have the floor leader that can pull a bill, the Speaker of the House that can pull a bill. Some of the bills never even get a hearing. Some of them go to a committee that's not theirs. I mean, it's so crazy.
Why does common sense not equate to common sense?
Common sense doesn't equal power, and it's all about power. It's not about equal representation of government. It's about individuals being able to control everything. I'm saying it flat out. I mean, it's just what it is. And if you look at every state, it's set up that way. And it wasn't meant to be that way, right? We're supposed to go and have
Government
a
for the
leader.
people.
That's it, 1,000%. And that speaker was not supposed to be able to decide which bills are heard and not heard. He's supposed to lead the government, guide it through,
Right,
but
yeah.
not dictate.
Right.
And at every level of government in every state of the country and in our federal government, you're seeing just the opposite of that. You're seeing they hand it over to a leader. Sometimes that leader's a good leader. Sometimes that leader's a bad leader.
What can we do as a population to help this not be that way so that
Well,
we can actually be represented properly?
Yeah, and my job, honestly, I feel like now that I've got out, my burden's even bigger to educate the people of Oklahoma as to what change needs to happen here. If we see that change in one state, we'll start seeing that change in other states and eventually in the federal government. And
Yeah.
I mean, why have a whip, right? A whip is somebody that goes around and gets a count as to what people think about a bill. Why do you care what somebody thinks about a bill? Put it up for public vote and vote on it. You'll know by the end of the vote what people think about it, whether it's a good bill or a bad bill. The unfortunate thing is you get a lot of people elected who don't want the public to know exactly what they feel and believe, right? I've had, I don't know how many politicians that would tell somebody that they believe a certain way and then they'll go vote the exact opposite way. I saw it all the time. I saw leaders stand up and say, I'm a man of my word. I stand on the word. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And then you go talk to a business owner and she says, well, he tells me he's voting for my bill. I go in and ask him. He says, no, I'm not voting for that bill. My name's Frank and Ernest. I'm Frank with them and Ernest with you, right? And I'd like to say that's not common, but it's more common than what you'd like to think.
So how would we go about it? Is there a way for the population to rework the government
There
from
is.
grassroots?
Yeah, I mean, we could, if we get a signature block and we could change it constitutionally by putting some of those mandates in place. But boy, you're talking about a lot of power coming after it. Now, I'll give you one example of power in Oklahoma. Years ago, the Turnpike Authority was set up, and the Turnpike Authority, they created the Turnpike and said as soon as construction is completed on the Turnpike, it'll roll back over and the people of Oklahoma will own it.
Yeah, I still see construction on the Turnpike to this day.
It never finishes and never will. Because as long as there's construction on the Turnpike, it's still owned by the investors of the Turnpike. And I had the Turnpike Authority come in my first or second year, I can't remember. And I asked them, this was in September, so we still had October, November, December to go. And as of September, I said, how many have gone through the turnpike as of right now? He said, as of this morning, $330 million. And I said, $330 million. Why did you borrow $100 million? He said, well, we had to pay our investors. I said, I want to be an investor. I want to be an investor. I want to invest. You can't. They set it up years ago under Democrat control. And all of that money, $330 million right now, sits in Bank of Oklahoma, sits in George Kaiser's bank accounts. George Kaiser's getting interest off of that, right? Well, guess what happens if you've got somebody that comes out and takes a stand against that turnpike? That interest, right, that's in one guy's hands or in several investors' hands, they can use that politically to go after somebody. That's why Gary Richardson got less than 1%, because they put $20-30 million against him. They've got the money to be able to do it. So that's just one example of power in Oklahoma that was set up a long time ago. That's really hard to defeat. People of Oklahoma don't want the turnpikes right now, but you see, we still have them.
Coming in or going out of Tulsa, you pretty much have to pay.
Oh, you got to pay.
You got to pay.
I pay every day, somewhere, every day.
Yeah. Pay to be on that road, in addition to the fuel tax that we pay at the pump.
Oh yeah, yeah. The fuel tax doesn't go to the turnpike. Fuel tax goes to all the other roads. Hopefully,
right.
Doesn't feel like it, does it?
I hope that they're doing the best that they can, because I certainly wouldn't want to have that job.
Oh, I'll tell you.
And the Kaiser Foundation is an amazing group of people that have done a lot of good work.
Fantastic job. Absolutely.
I love the gathering place that they did.
Yep.
And he's a good investor.
Yeah, he's a good investor and very savvy politically too. Right? There's politics even with a gathering place, right? So
sure.
Everything's politics.
Yeah.
And but yeah, they've done some great things, and you just never know. I mean, when you sit back and look at some of the things the people of Oklahoma have to pay for, all of that was done through some vote, some committee, some person, some individual. And we were talking earlier how votes have consequences, sometimes unintended consequences.
Sure. So. Yeah. Or maybe votes, maybe new bills, maybe doing away with regulation. I mean, there's a lot of movement right now in our federal government.
Absolutely.
Is going to have impact on a lot of people and a lot of repercussions that I hope that most of the things are good. I think they're trying to do the best they can with what they have.
Sure.
Like you said, it's broke.
It's broke. It's broke.
So how do you break worse what's already broke?
Exactly.
Hopefully they can pick up the pieces that are a little bit of collateral damage and get that fixed.
Well, and even on the federal side, they have not officially passed a budget in 15, 20 years. They just continue these continuing resolutions. Well, what that means is I don't have to vote on a budget. We just take last year's budget, add some to it, and keep pushing it down the road. Well, you keep adding to a budget every year. What good's a budget, right? So,
well, my bank account just keeps on swelling because I write bigger checks.
Yeah.
Isn't that how it works?
All we need is a print machine.
So bringing it back to your experience at the House of Representatives and your challenges of not being able to get bills in front of people, what else did you experience while you were there?
One of the most rewarding things, honestly, is not what I thought would even be a part of my life there. And my very first year, a buddy of mine, Justin Jackson, brought to me he told me, he said, hey, there's this TV series called Killing Richard Glossip. And he said, I think we've got an innocent guy on death row in Oklahoma. And when I started looking at death row in Oklahoma, 10% of the people on death row were actually exonerated when DNA evidence came in. They'd gone through 1 trials, 2 trials, many of them getting ready to be put to death. And DNA evidence proved that they weren't guilty, so they released them. So at least 10% of the time we were making mistakes, even on death row.
Yeah.
But I still, 2 trials, and these folks have heard all the evidence, and they put Richard Glossip behind closed doors, and he had 3 last meals. I mean, he was that close. Literally had
3 different times.
3 different times, 3 last meals. He had 10 different death row dates over a 27-year period of time. But he was actually next to be in line when that drug problem happened with Oklahoma. I don't know if you remember the drugs that they were given to people on death row. It was causing convulsions and stuff like that. They ended up giving wrong drugs to one of them or something. And so there was a stay of execution that time. He had a couple of stays. While I was in, I asked Governor Stitt to give a 30-day stay because I'd gone to the Attorney General at that time, Mike Hunter, and I'd gone to the attorney for Richard Glossip, and I said, show me where he's innocent or show me where he's guilty. Give me some proof. And neither side could really prove it out, right? So I thought, well, I can't fully believe his attorney. And when I go to the AG's office, the AG held up a manila envelope my very first day over there and had 6 or 7 other attorneys sitting around a table with a big old box of evidence. And he said, he's guilty. Everything you're hearing about, he's guilty. There's no new evidence, no nothing. And he said, did you know he took a lie detector test? And he held it up in the air. And I said, no, I didn't know that. And he threw it down on the table. And he said, and he failed. The guy's guilty. And so I left and started doing more digging on my own and finally figured out that we're going to have a third party come in. And I truly wanted a third party to dig into both sides and tell me, I didn't want you to tell me he's guilty. I didn't want you to tell me he was innocent. I want to know what you think the truth is.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me the findings.
Now, tell me what
Keep
you
it
find.
simple.
Yeah. And they put 30 attorneys on it. About
Wow.
a $1.5 million deal. Cost the state nothing. They volunteered their time. And when they came back, they had 350 pages and a lot of evidence. I found out the state of Oklahoma, in Richard Glossip's case, destroyed a box of evidence between his 2 trials. And when they destroyed that evidence, they didn't destroy it with the case number that it belonged under. They converted the case number to a different case number and destroyed the evidence. And we've got proof of that. I mean, I'm not just saying that. We know that. And so they
This stuff doesn't happen.
purposely tried to hide it.
This stuff doesn't happen, Kevin.
It's exactly what I thought until started digging into this thing. And I mean, there was a box, 7 boxes of evidence that they would never turn over to us. That the DA of Oklahoma City, Prater, continued to hide. We knew about it. He knew we knew about it, but he would not turn it over to let anybody dig through it. When they finally got it after, and I believe it was after John O'Connor was the Attorney General, they sent the 7 boxes over to Attorney General O'Connor. They allowed the third-party investigators to get access to it. They dug through the boxes and found 7 Brady violations in those boxes, one of which was they never disclosed that he was on a drug that was for, I believe, some kind of mental illness, right? And it came up in court, but in court they said, no, that drug was actually because he had a cold, right? They just completely wiped over it. And it wasn't because he had a cold, it was because they were treating him for mental illness. And if they're treating him for mental illness and he's your only witness that's saying Richard Glossip's the one that told him to do it, it's pretty big evidence. And so they got him for Brady violation. So by the time Gettner Drummond came in, Gettner came into the room. He was one of the 3 that actually sat down and listened. And he told me, he said, I know he's guilty, but I'm here to listen. And he listened. And when we showed him the 350 pages, he actually went and got a third-party investigation of his own, came to the same conclusion we did, raised it all the way to the top, went to Court of Criminal Appeals, and the Court of Criminal Appeals said, we don't care what the top law enforcement officer of Oklahoma says. We're going to put him to death anyway. And so they ruled against the Attorney General. Then it goes to the Pardon and Parole Board, and the Pardon and Parole Board said the same thing. Screw you guys, we're going to put him to death anyway. And then we had to go to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. So now they're in a predicament because you got the U.S. Supreme Court, and in Oklahoma we have the top law enforcement officer saying you can't trust the case. You got the Court of Criminal Appeals saying, what's this legislator doing messing around in judicial business, right? Let's kill the guy. And as of 2 weeks ago, the United States Supreme Court agreed with us. They vacated his sentence, and he'll probably be walking out of jail here in the next 3 to 4 weeks by a miracle of God, 100%.
What happens to that man's life is a good question to me. How long was he in prison?
27 years on death row, not just in prison. 27 years on death row.
Describe what death row looks like to us.
Yeah, death row at one point, and we had it changed, but at one point you have 4 cells that lead up to the death chamber. And 4 weeks prior to death, you're in the fourth cell. When you get put in that fourth cell, you're not allowed to have anything in there but your Bible. That's it. No communication, no nothing. In fact, you can't put your head under the covers, and you're not allowed to have the lights off. So lights on 24/7, guard watching you 24/7. Can't put your head under the covers, can't have anything in the room with you. In the third week, you move to the third cell. Second week, move to the second cell. Last week, you move to the last cell. In that last cell, it goes all the way down to where you get your last meal. Last meal, they let you order whatever you want. You get your meal, and then they come walk you down the hallway, and they strap you to the table, and they give you the drugs that execute you. And I took a tour through that entire place, took legislators through, because if we're voting on these things, you want to know what's that. And there were a number of legislators that couldn't even stand in the room where we put people to death because it's that eerie. It really is. And when you think about how many people have we put to death there, what have we done,
And you're a blue-blooded American Republican guy that believes in Second Amendment rights and First Amendment rights for sure. And you're telling us that this was disturbing.
It was disturbing. And not only that, I'm a guy that believes in a death penalty. I believe if you rape a 2-year-old child and you slice her in the throat and you bury her in a shallow grave, there's got to be the death penalty option. My problem with Oklahoma
Good deterrent. Good deterrent.
It's a good deterrent. It's a good deterrent. You would think. The problem I have with Oklahoma is that system has to be pure. You have to know and trust the system. I don't trust our judicial system in Oklahoma anymore because every time they saw new evidence, they denied it. Every time they saw new evidence in his trial, they denied it.
Why?
They didn't want to admit wrong because they believe if you admit wrong in the justice system one time, you're wrong every time, right?
You got to be 100%.
Got to be 100%. And all I kept saying was people will trust you more if you stand up and own up to your mistakes.
Absolutely. Right? We're human. Our system is not 100%. It's the best that we can to keep people safe.
That's right.
And we're real with people. If we've made a mistake, we own up to it and we keep on going.
And keep on going. And it might take some pain to go through when you admit that mistake, right? Because you got to fix several things. State of Oklahoma had a lady with Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation that was falsifying DNA evidence. They called her the Black Widow, right? Do you remember this at all?
I don't.
So she was falsifying evidence. They caught her, and I'm talking over hundreds of cases. They caught her, and guess what they did to her? They fired her. They didn't criminally charge her. They didn't prosecute her.
Lady's doing this intentionally.
How many intentionally? Times? It affected a couple hundred cases, right? So everyone knows it. Judicial system knows it. If they prosecuted her, it would have overturned all those other cases. They'd had to gone back. If the state would have stood up and admitted there's been a mistake and we need to own up to it, they would have had to go back and look at 200 cases, and they didn't want to do that. So instead of prosecuting her, admitting fault, just fire her, get rid of the problem, get somebody else in. You got 200 cases she could have completely wronged, right? Outside of the ones they knew about. And so, I mean, it's things like that you've got to be able to own up to. And
why is the system as broken as it is? Why do we not take ownership for our lives and move forward? Yeah. You would think that those people that are in those powerful positions, we would hope anyway, against hope, that they would do what's right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, power, pride, a lot of those things are
insecurity.
A big reason. Insecurity.
Insecurity, laziness, slothfulness.
I mean, when I look at the makeup of Oklahoma, and it's true, whether these guys want to admit it's true or not, when those 5 judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals voted against Gettner Drummond, I mean, that's huge, right? Why would they vote against it? I mean, it left me dumbfounded. And then it goes to the Pardon and Parole Board, and the Pardon and Parole Board is supposed to be able to look at somebody and say, you've rehabilitated or you've not. We're either going to pardon you, we're going to parole you, or we're going to just send you back and ignore you, right? But instead of putting psychologists in that can tell whether or not somebody's been rehabilitated, we put DAs in there whose job is to send people to jail, right? So these guys are expert at putting people in jail, not expert at evaluating whether or not somebody's been rehabilitated. And so I went and looked at the makeup of the 5 judges. 4 of the 5 judges were former DAs. When you go to the Pardon and Parole Board, 4 of the 5, former DAs. The DA's counsel had communication in the background telling these guys, you better rule against Gettner Drummond, right? And I suspected that, but we did an open records request of all their communication, and all of them are like, we didn't communicate. We have nothing. We have nothing to give you. We have nothing to give you. Until one came in with integrity. And he said, yeah, here's some of my communication. And then it implicated all those guys that said they didn't have communication, right? So now we're still in the middle of that. I've still got lawsuits filed against DAs right now, and walking through that process to try and prove them out.
Seems like you might not be that popular of a fellow in certain circles.
I can't speed down the roads, that's for sure. But the thing is, right's right. And it's like when that case came across my desk, I knew for a fact that if I didn't fight for Richard Glossip, nobody else would. And had we not fought for him, he'd be dead today. No doubts.
What's the big deal? One more dead person had nothing to do with you. Just turn your head and let it happen.
Yeah, couldn't do it on my watch. And it's not politically, you don't gain points by fighting for something like that at all.
Yeah.
But it was the right thing to do. And like I said, I've told news media all around the world when they've come in and interviewed on this thing, because it's a big deal. And I told them even months before I knew, he will walk out of jail one of these days. When he does, it's a complete miracle of God when he does, because there's not one individual that could actually win this thing with the pressure and the power that's pushing against this guy. Even now, I'm still not believing that he's going to walk out, but he will.
Time's getting pretty close.
Yeah.
With the end of the podcast, leave us with something good.
Oh, well, man, the people of Oklahoma are so good. We've got a great state. We've got a great state for business. We've got some good leaders. We've got some good people that really care. I think that the things I'd say is, man, get out and meet the candidates that run for these local offices. Meet them face to face, shake their hand, throw every mailer that comes in the mail out into the trash because they are worthless. Go know the candidates, ask them tough questions, and then make them stand behind their word, right? Oklahoma, I'm telling you, we brought in more business in the last 8 years to the state of Oklahoma. So we're vibrant, we're doing well, we're growing, the economy's doing well. There's so many good things. Life's so much better when you turn off the news, I can tell you that, because 99% of it's not right anyway. Go check it out yourself. But God's good, and we've got a great state, and our country's going to be prosperous, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for coming to Tulsa Talks today, Kevin.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.
We are here to help you discover or develop your passions, how you can use them, and why you exist. How can we help you help others better?